Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, dear listeners, hello and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for tuning into this solo episode. Today it's podcast recording day for me. I'm planning on recording a couple of podcasts on the topic of maintenance calories. That's the plan, at least. If these two topics end up being relatively easy to cover, quick to cover, I might combine these supposedly two episodes into one, but most likely I expect that they will be released as two separate episodes, because when I'm thinking that I am going to only need one episode, I usually end up needing two. Whereas this time, I'm starting prepared. I'm thinking I'm probably going to need more than one episode to discuss what I want to discuss. So in this initial episode, I want to talk about how you can increase your maintenance calories. Because wouldn't it be cool if we could maintain our current weight and eat more calories than we're eating? I mean, at least in my case, I would certainly enjoy that. And it is indeed possible, but there are some widespread myths currently in the fitness community on what's truly effective. So what I want to do in this episode is cover 4 evidence-based facts and 2 myths about how you can increase your maintenance calories. But before I get to the first fact, it's really important to clarify the principle that underlies everything I am going to talk about, which is the principle of calorie balance. Ultimately, the only way to increase your maintenance calories is to induce the body to burn more calories, so that it will require a greater caloric intake in order to avoid ending up in a calorie deficit. So if anybody tries to persuade you that they can hijack your hormones or give you some miraculous supplement, or that in some way that has nothing to do with burning more calories, they can get you to increase your maintenance calories, they're not telling you the truth. And with that out of the way, the first fact I want to talk about is that increasing your body weight is going to increase your maintenance calories, because a larger body requires more calories in order to function. However, I doubt that permanent weight gain is the go-to strategy for most of you listeners. But I did want to touch on this first and foremost because there could be some of you that may be on a weight gain journey. In which case, if you were seeing some success with your weight gain, but now you've plateaued for a while, that may be because what used to be your maintenance calories are no longer your maintenance calories. Now they're a bit of a deficit because you have a greater body mass. Whereas your old surplus calories is now closer to your maintenance, if not exactly your maintenance. So the reason why you're plateaued is that you need more calories in order to continue growing. The second fact is that increasing your muscle mass also increases your maintenance calories. Now, this isn't the same as saying that increasing your body weight increases your maintenance calories for 3 main reasons. One is that you can increase your body weight by increasing both fat and muscle tissue. 2 is that you can increase your body weight by primarily increasing fat tissue with very little additional muscle. For example, if you simply eat in a surplus and you don't train at all, you are going to gain weight, but very little of that is going to be muscle. You're only going to gain enough muscle in that process as is necessary for the body to be able to withstand the additional fat tissue, and that's going to be a very tiny amount. 3 is that you can increase muscle mass even without a change in body weight if you also lose some body fat in the process, and this is called body recomposition. Now, if you take two people with the same body weight, the person with the greater muscle mass also burns more calories because muscle mass is a very metabolically active tissue, meaning that, especially compared to body fat, a pound of muscle mass burns more calories and therefore requires more calories to be maintained than a pound of body fat. Therefore, by the same token, building more muscle than you currently carry will increase your current caloric expenditure, so you will need higher maintenance calories. Having said that, some people can make this sound more exciting than it truly is. Because according to the research I'm aware of, the difference in caloric expenditure between muscle mass and fat tissue appears to be the following. Muscle mass tends to burn 10 to 15 calories per kilogram of body mass per day, whereas fat tissue burns 4 to 5 calories per kilogram of body mass per day. So you may think, that's amazing, fat tissue burns 2 to 3 times less calories than muscle. But if you do the math, the actual increase in caloric expenditure from muscle mass isn't all that amazing. Because if you were to build an extra 5 kilo of muscle, so an extra 11 pounds, you would be burning an extra 50 to 75 calories per day, which is the caloric equivalent to a medium egg, which, yes, it is an increase to your metabolic rate, but we're not talking 200-300 calories on top of your maintenance, as some people may persuade you or may lead you to believe. Not only that, but building 5 kilograms of muscle takes a long flipping time. How long? We don't know exactly. There are some models that try to estimate how much muscle you can gain over a certain period of time. And the model I'm most familiar with was created by Lyle McDonald, who is a real industry veteran. I have learned a lot from Lyle. He is a real authority in the fitness community. Anyway, based on this model, a cisgender man, so an AMAB person who identifies as a man, may build 20 to 25 pounds of muscle in his first year of consistent, well-executed hypertrophy-specific training. And that's 9 to 11 kilograms of muscle. Whereas a cisgender woman may build roughly half as much, so 5 to 10 kilograms. These values are likely to differ if you're on hormone therapy for the purpose of transitioning to your chosen gender, although to my knowledge we don't really have a ton of data on by how much they might differ, or rather we have no data on that comparison actually, as far as I know. In any case, in summary, depending on your genetics, sex assigned at birth, hormonal milieu, and consistency with hypertrophy-oriented training and nutrition, it's going to take you at a minimum 6 months to a year as a beginner to build 5 kilograms of muscle, if we assume that Lyle's model is somewhat correct. And these are the fastest gains you're ever going to make. If you are more advanced, building 5 kilograms of muscle is going to take longer than a year. Although, again, the actual time depends on how advanced you are exactly and all the other factors I've already mentioned. So let's reframe this. In a year's time as a beginner, or in several years' time as an advanced trainee, you likely have built enough new muscle to be able to eat an extra egg every day to maintain your weight. That doesn't sound quite as amazing as it seemed earlier, right? But this is an important perspective to have, because otherwise, Some people in the community may make it sound as though building muscle is going to turn you into an anabolic machine that can maintain their weight on 4,000 calories per day, and that's simply not the case unless you are a genetic freak and or you are taking performance enhancing drugs or PEDs. Third fact I want to discuss is that increasing your activity levels is going to increase your maintenance calories. And not only that, but a high energy output through physical activity, when it is matched with an equally high caloric intake to support all these movements, seems to be an effective and health promoting strategy to increase your maintenance calories. And I say that based on the research that has been conducted so far on a concept known as energy flux, which is the amount of energy going through the system of the human body. You're in a state of so-called high energy flux when you're expending a lot of energy and you're also eating a lot of energy in order to maintain your current body composition. And based on this research, it seems that a higher energy flux has two main benefits. Number one, it helps you maintain fat loss successfully in the long term. And number two, it improves your metabolic health even if your weight doesn't change. Whereas normally it's when we see fat loss, if one is carrying excess body fats, that we experience significant benefits to our health. Finally, and importantly, of all of the strategies to increase your maintenance calories that I have addressed so far, increasing your energy output is the one strategy that's most likely to have a tangible outcome in a relatively short time. Because, as I mentioned, building muscle can be a very health promoting endeavor, and it is going to increase your maintenance calories, but the results take way longer. Now, the fourth fact that I want to talk about is that taking testosterone as part of your transition from female to your chosen gender is going to increase your metabolic rate. And typically, that's because testosterone is a steroid. It increases the speed at which you can build muscle mass, and it induces symptoms similar to puberty, which is why often in the gender diverse community we talk about going on testosterone as a second puberty. For all these reasons, you're going to find yourself building muscle at a greater rate than when you didn't have this increase in exogenous testosterone. Therefore, you are going to find that you burn more calories than before because building muscle is a costly process for the body, and having more muscle also costs energy. And these are the only 4 evidence-based facts about how you can increase your maintenance calories. So to finish off, let me touch upon 2 very popular widespread myths. The first myth is that reverse dieting increases your maintenance calories. Reverse dieting is a dietary strategy that you can employ when you're transitioning from a calorie deficit back to your maintenance calories. Normally, people do it this way. They increase their calories gradually, typically by around 100 calories per week, or at the very least, that's what I would do when I want a client to reverse diet. And so every week you make this gradual increase until you've bridged the gap between your calorie deficit range and your maintenance calories range. And some claim that this process increases your maintenance calories because it's boosting your metabolism, implying or outright stating that your metabolism was damaged by being in a deficit for a prolonged period of time. But this doesn't actually pan out in research. First of all, a deficit does not damage your metabolism. You don't need to spend time fixing your metabolism after you've gone on a diet. You can see a slowdown in your metabolism, and this is called metabolic adaptation, meaning the less calories you intake via food, the more efficient your body becomes at utilizing those calories, because the body has a protective mechanism against weight loss, especially excessive weight loss. So it's going to try to slow down the process of weight loss in any way possible, especially when you've been in a deficit for a prolonged period of time, or you've lost a considerable amount of weight, or if you haven't been in a deficit for a long time, you might have been in a deficit for a shorter period, but it was a very aggressive deficit. In all these cases, research shows a slowdown in your metabolic rates due to metabolic adaptation. This is normal. It's simply your body working really, really well. There is nothing to fix. And in fact, metabolic adaptation can be reversed in most cases by returning to maintenance calories. You don't need to reverse diet to build up your metabolic rate. Now, I also want to make two important statements. The first is that some people may genuinely believe that reverse dieting was what helped their metabolism. And in my experience, these are people that before trying to reverse diet were under the impression that increasing their calories would immediately cause fat gain. But what's more likely to have happened is that these same people would try to bump up their calories closer to their estimated maintenance. As a result of doing that, they would experience a sharp increase in scale weight, and they would get scared and they would lower their calories again. And I say these people and I say they as if these people aren't me. No, this was also me. I believe that my calories were lower than they actually were, because when I increased them out of a deficit, sorry about that, I don't know why my voice went so high pitched right there. Anyway, when I increased them a little bit above a deficit, I would see these bump up in the scale that would really scare me. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm regaining body fat, and I would drop those calories back down. And this was way before I was coaching, when my understanding was very inaccurate. Now, what's actually happening when you're gaining that weight is that you have more gut residue, you have more food in your stomach because you're eating more. And you also have more carbs in your body, because usually when we increase calories, we are also going to increase our carbohydrate intake. And every gram of carbohydrates is absorbed with 3 to 4 grams of water. So when you're eating an extra 50 grams of carbs, you're not just going to weigh 50 grams more, you're actually going to weigh 150 to 200 grams more because of the extra carbohydrate. And especially if you regularly resistance train, you are going to store those carbs and that water in your muscle as glycogen to be used to power resistance training. Or rather, you're going to store the water and you're going to store the carbs as glycogen. I didn't mean to say that you also store water as glycogen. We do not turn water into glycogen. We turn blood glucose into glycogen, which then gets stored in the muscle and in the liver, primarily, but not exclusively. Not only that, but when you have more calories, you also tend to have more energy, which results typically in training harder in the gym. And when you're training harder, you have more inflammation, which increases water retention, because we have an increase in cortisol, which comes with a little bit of water retention typically. So for all these reasons, it's totally normal for your body weight to go up when you go from a deficit back to maintenance. Anyway, if you don't have a knowledgeable coach giving you realistic expectations about the nature of this weight gain, of course you're going to be like I was and see that number on the scale go up and get scared that you're regaining fat, especially after you've put so much effort into losing that fat. And as a result, I completely understand that you would drop your calories back down into a deficit, see that the scale goes down again, and convince yourself that indeed this deficit is actually your maintenance calories. So I'm not at all criticizing the people who think that reverse dieting was the key to increasing their metabolic rate, to fixing their metabolism without fat regain. Because what happens when you reverse diet and increase your calories a little at a time, you're unlikely to see the same sharp increase in body weight. And so you might believe that reverse dieting boosted your metabolism. The second point I want to make to wrap up this myth is that even though I discussed the fact that reverse dieting does not in fact boost your metabolism, this doesn't mean it's useless. I actually utilize it in my coaching practice because while it doesn't seem to have any proven physiological benefits, it can have excellent psychological benefits, especially for the type of person I've just talked about, because it's going to encourage them to eat more and actually get back to their maintenance calories instead of believing that their deficit calories are their actual maintenance, which then would lead to them feeling restricted by the small amount of food that they think they need to eat in order to maintain their hard-earned results. Not only that, but this type of person is also somebody who's maybe never lost weight successfully and kept it off for the long haul. That's why they're so terrified of putting it back on again. And for this reason, estimating their real new maintenance calories at these lower body weights is going to take some trial and error because they don't have any prior data to look back on. They've never lost weight and maintained it successfully. So how would they know how many calories they now need at this new body weight to maintain the results? And reverse dieting can suit this situation really well because it's going to give you the opportunity to gauge your maintenance calories more accurately by making conservative increases. Having said that, you can take this too far. For instance, some people only increase their calories by 50 or less every week or longer. And this is a measly increase in calories that keeps you in a deficit, even though it's a smaller deficit over time, for way longer than you need to or maybe you even want to. In my view, if your goal is to transition back to maintenance calories, then you want to spend as little time as possible still in a deficit. Otherwise, you're telling yourself that you want to go back to maintenance, but you're not acting in true alignment with this goal, which is fine, as long as you acknowledge that then your goal isn't to go back to maintenance and you still want to lose body fat. If you do indeed want to stop fat loss, then you gotta stop fat loss. The reverse dieting approach that I usually take entails boosting calories by around 100 at a time, not necessarily every week, because the frequency and the actual amount of calories that I add back depends on the person, ultimately. And you also need a little bit of time between increases to ascertain whether the new caloric intake is still a deficit or not. And ultimately, you can only do that by checking your body weight, pictures, and measurements and seeing if they remain relatively stable at the new caloric increase or whether they are still decreasing, meaning that you're still in a little bit of a deficit. The second and last myth that I want to discuss is that bulking increases your maintenance calories. Now, some people may find that when they're in a muscle building phase in a surplus, they have to increase their calories a lot more than they expected based on their original maintenance calories in order to gain weight at an appropriate pace to maximize muscle gain and minimize fat accumulation. For example, shout out to my client Riz. Riz has been in a bulking phase since August 2024, and originally his maintenance calories were around 2,000 to 2,200, and his weight has barely moved in all of these months, and he's currently on around 2900 calories, 28 to 2900 calories. Now, if we use the rule of thumb based on which a pound of body weight equals around 3500 calories, so if you enter a 500 calorie surplus per day on top of your maintenance, you're going to gain a pound per week. From 2200 calories to 2000 to 2200, Riss would have actually been gaining a pound a week on 25 to 2700 calories. His weight has, I kid you not, barely moved, and I might have to increase his calories still from 2900 to 3000 or more based on the data. Does this mean that when he stops bulking, his maintenance calories will also have been increased? Certainly not to the extent where now they're going to be maintaining their weight on 300-400 more calories than before, unless we have built a shit ton of muscle. Now, these are the two main reasons why this may be happening. The first is that this kind of person has a very adaptive metabolism. And an adaptive metabolism fights harder than an average metabolism to maintain homeostasis and avoid weight gain in a surplus, and also fat loss in a deficit. So when you're in a surplus, it's going to increase your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, your NEAT, or the amount of energy you burn from subconscious activity, to a greater degree than what other people may experience. Which means that without realizing, you start fidgeting more, blinking more, and generally just moving more without thinking about it, which obviously increases your energy expenditure. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's crazy, I know, that some research has shown that NEAT differences between people can be as large as 500 plus calories, meaning there are some people who can burn an extra 500 calories more than other people simply from their NEAT, from fidgeting, from moving around, from, I don't know, tapping their foot without thinking. It's absolutely fascinating, and also hopefully gives you some insight into why some people may need so many more calories in a surplus to actually create that surplus. The thing is, sometimes the metabolism can be adaptive both ways, meaning that once you reduce your calories again and you transition out of a surplus, your body is going to adapt to that decrease in calories almost just as fast. And so, as a result, your maintenance calories will be pretty much exactly the same as when you started. Unless, again, you've built so much more muscle that you're now burning some more calories in order to maintain the new tissue. But, as I addressed earlier, a scenario in which you're building so much more muscle that you increase your maintenance by hundreds of calories is quite unlikely, because typically a gaining phase in a surplus might be 3, 4, 12 months, sometimes longer. But given how slow muscle growth is, and how little even 5 kilograms of muscle seems to contribute to your metabolic rate, I struggle to believe that you're increasing your calories in a surplus by 700 above what you thought you needed, and also now your maintenance calories are 700 calories more than you thought that they might have been. Finally, this can also come back to bite some people in the butt, because some of these people with an adaptive metabolism in a surplus, not all of them, also experience an adaptive metabolism in a deficit, to where they need to diet on lower calories than they expected, because their body defends very effectively against both fat gain and fat loss. Whereas for other people, the metabolism might be only adaptive in one direction versus the other. The other reason why your maintenance calories may seem inflated in a surplus, simply because you need many more calories than you expected to create that surplus, is that many people transition into a higher frequency and higher intensity program when they start a muscle building phase. It's not uncommon For my beginner clients who are embarking upon their first muscle building phase ever and under my guidance, to go from a 3-day program to a 4 or a 5-day program. As a result of that, their maintenance can go up because they're training more frequently, often harder than before, and with better execution than when they had less experience. And so the caloric demand of that training is overall higher. If that is the case, and you stay on that higher intensity and higher frequency program after you transition out of a surplus, your maintenance calories may remain higher. But I will also say that the first reason I mentioned, the fact that some people have an adaptive metabolism, is the most likely factor at play if you find that, like my client Res, you literally have to eat hundreds of calories more than you expected. Whereas if the main factor at play for you specifically is not so much an adaptive metabolism, but a change in your training program, then you are not going to burn as many calories from that as you would under the circumstances of an increase in NEAT. So, in summary, do not assume that simply because you need to eat more calories than you expected to gain weight, that will result in a proportional increase in your maintenance calories once you transition away from a calorie surplus. And finally, just to be absolutely clear, I am not claiming that no one ever would be able to build so much muscle as to increase their maintenance calories within a relatively short-term muscle building phase. But I do think that this is most likely only if you're a genetic freak and or if you take PEDs. And most of the people that I coach don't fall under either category. So the most likely explanations for a supposed increase in maintenance calories, or at least the most likely explanation as to why they're eating so many more calories than they expected in a bulking phase, remain an adaptive metabolism and or an increase in energy output, whether that's from your training program or whether that's because for some reason in a bulk you also decided to do more steps and or more cardio. So to wrap up this podcast, the most effective ways that are also evidence-based to increase your maintenance calories without gaining body weight in the form of extra fat mass are going to be adopting a high energy flux lifestyle and building more muscle mass. And that's a wrap for the first of the 2 episodes relating to maintenance calories that I wanted to record for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, if you enjoy my content and you're thinking, he sounds like the perfect guy to coach me, you can sign up for online coaching via the link in my bio, where you can also read more about the service and pricing. Otherwise, in order to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and or a review on the podcast platform that you're using. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that, and until the next episode. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.